such an asshole.
I'm not trying to.
I was supposed to die in that hospital. My life would have fucking mattered. But you took that from me.
With The Last of Us Part 3 rumoured to be in development, I've seen a lot of varying takes on what people want from this game. Calls for it to be an open world game, for it to be a prequel, for it to be a completely new story with entirely unrelated characters, and of course for it to retcon Joel's death in Part 2.
It's so dumb.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb!
I've made a separate video previously on why I don't want the prequel most people want, Joel and Tommy just being bloodthirsty hunters in the time after Sarah died. I can get on board with prequels that cover other aspects, like Tommy's conversion to and defection from the Fireflies, but that should be its own thing. If the story goes backwards, outside perhaps of flashbacks, then it's not really Part 3. Likewise if it just jumps to tell a different story. Sure, there's a wide world that Naughty Dog have created with 1,000,001 possible stories in it, some already hinted at in the world building of the existing games. It would be cool to explore more of them in spin-offs, prequels, and even other media like comics and the TV show. Part 3 should, ultimately, be the third part of the story we're already invested in, because there's still a lot more to tell. And, just to address it, that story is best told on rails. An open world Part 3 with branching paths both in gameplay and perhaps narratively would just be tonally jarring and a lot harder to get right. Let Naughty Dog do what they do best. But easily the most pervasive notion I've seen about Part 3 is that it could or should end with Ellie dying, specifically giving her life for the cure to the cordyceps infection and taking the choice that Joel robbed her of in the end of Part 1. This is not only quite popular, but also seen as the natural conclusion of the series. I'm open to being proven wrong on this, or I think if Naughty Dog did go down this route, it would give an unsatisfying and worse, predictable end to one of the greatest video game stories there is. Before we look at why it shouldn't happen, let's start with why people think it should. The essence of it is that those proposing this view Ellie's character arc for Part 3 as rooted in two things: redemption for the things she did in Part 2, and reclaiming the agency that Joel took from her in Part 1. As such, it makes sense for her to volunteer to be the subject of the vaccine operation and give her life to finally achieve both of these things. If you want to check out the best articulated version of this story, then you should watch Dan aka Wolf of Thorns' videos on this. He has one covering how he sees Ellie and Abby completing the hero's journey in Part 3, and one on what the world of The Last of Us looks like after Ellie is gone. And they're both very good, even if I take a very different notion on how the story should pan out. Getting into that, my view boils down to a few key points. 1. Ellie's arc is not about redemption and agency, but about meaning. 2. Abby's arc in that respect is complete, and finding the reformed Fireflies presents a new journey, which, given the parallels that have framed so much of Part 1 and Part 2, is likely to involve addressing her own past and how she views her father. 3. The Fireflies being an unconditional force for good simply doesn't fit with the world building of the previous games. And 4. Pinning hope for the future on a vaccine or cure explicitly undercuts everything that the community of Jackson represents. Starting with Ellie's character arc, whilst The Last of Us Part 1 is primarily focused on Ellie and Joel's relationship and how it evolves throughout that story, we continually see Ellie wrestling with what it means to represent a cure for mankind. Even before they become close, Joel's concern over the Fireflies putting this on Ellie is clear in their conversation as they see the capital in the distance, and he's pulled back from concerning himself too much with this by Tess. Ellie throughout the game references it in a way that suggests she views it as important but doesn't truly grasp the weight of it all. After the giraffe scene, Joel again offers her a way out. What she says here, her words to Joel in the farmhouse after running away from Tommy's dam, and her last monologue in the game about Riley all speak to what drives her to do this.
After all we've been through. Everything that I've done. It can't be for nothing. Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared. Back in Boston, back when I was bitten, I wasn't alone. My best friend was there. And she got bit too. I'm still waiting for my turn.
Ellie.
Her name was Riley, and she was the first to die. And then it was Tess. And then Sam.
Survivor's guilt, rather than moral obligation, is what pushes her to the Fireflies, just as it pushes her through her worst acts in Seattle and to leave Dina in order to pursue Abby in Santa Barbara. When she pulls back from killing Abby at the last moment, she isn't forgiving Abby for killing Joel, or finally beginning to accept that she can find meaning in her life beyond assuaging the guilt she has that she is still alive when others aren't. You can finally begin to forgive Joel and to lay his spirit to rest by getting past that feeling, and in turn embrace the message that both those she left behind had for her about finding a reason to keep living.
I struggled for a long time with surviving. And no matter what, you keep finding something to fight for.
There are a million ways we should have died before today. And a million ways we can die before tomorrow. But we fight for every second we get to spend with each other. Whether it's 2 minutes or 2 days, we don't give that up. I don't want to give that up.
That reason, we can safely presume, is Dina. Ellie's guilt at those who've died while she survived is reflected in her fear of ending up alone. Dying in St. Mary's Hospital, or in her single-minded pursuit of vengeance, offers an easy way to escape the risk of that. Coming back to Jackson and fighting for a life and family with Dina is harder, but as we see from her wearing Dina's bracelet in the epilogue and leaving Joel's guitar behind, Ellie seems to finally be willing to fight for that, rather than to sacrifice herself on the basis that her surviving is something she ought to feel sorry for. Her character arc in Part 3, then, is best utilised seeing her fully reject survivor's guilt and finally embrace life and the things that make it worth living. Moving on to Abby, it's strongly implied by the title screen of The Last of Us Part 2 after you finish it that her and Lev reach Catalina Island and the Fireflies who are regrouping there. These Fireflies are the most likely candidates to be working on a vaccine, not only because it continues their previous work, but because there's no incentive for them not to. This means that any story involving a vaccine will involve them, and by extension Abby. If what Abby does is continue the work of her father, then not only does that present plot holes given her lack of medical knowledge, and why the Fireflies would train a soldier to work on this rather than a doctor or scientist, but it also presents nothing interesting in terms of a character arc for her. Likewise, if Abby is absent from the story, then it simply invites the question of what she's doing and erodes the suspension of disbelief. To be credibly involved in a story centered around the revived pursuit of a cure and Ellie's immunity, then, the most interesting things for her to tackle narratively are her feelings towards Ellie and her feelings towards the Fireflies and the organisation her father was a part of. If we simply focus on Ellie, then all we can really do is turn Abby into an antagonist trying to snatch Ellie for the cure, which could potentially be interesting depending on how long the two spend together, but can very quickly become tired or predictable. But if we also explore her relationship with the Fireflies, and particularly the moral ambiguity of the group, then there's a lot more to do here. It gives a deeper role to her relationship with Lev, who towards the end of Part 2 took on the role not only of a younger sibling but also a conscience, stopping her from killing Dina. Lev could take the same role here, seeing through the Fireflies both due to being free from the baggage Abby holds, but also having the comparison of the WLF from the outside. He could be the one to pull the rose-tinted glasses from Abby's eyes, and in doing so provide a far more compelling reason for Abby and Ellie to interact in any way other than mutual animosity, through the Fireflies serving as a common foe. This brings us onto the role of the Fireflies in The Last of Us. They were a revolutionary group fighting against the tyranny of martial law in the quarantine zones, which gives them more depth and more to sympathise with than the military or hunters. But we also see them attack Joel as he tries to revive an unconscious Ellie, urge Marlene to kill Joel, and march him out violently when he objects to their intentions with Ellie. Regardless of the morality of Joel's actions in robbing Ellie of her apparent intended choice, the Fireflies robbed Ellie in practice of any choice at all and opted to perform surgery on her without seeking her consent. They are not unequivocal good guys. They're as stained in grey as any group in the narrative, and however noble their ends, the means they use are clearly not. The graffiti Ellie finds in the museum flashback of Part 2, of a former Firefly lamenting his crimes, illustrates that perfectly. By contrast, real hope for humanity in this world lies with communities like Jackson, the restoration of cooperative and productive society, with food and other resources available through trade and production rather than scavenging the remnants of the old world. The likelihood of the Fireflies seeing Jackson as a threat to their plans rather than an ally, based on their need for control and their militaristic chain of command, puts that community and others like it at odds with the militia group. This again is far more interesting a dynamic than heroic rebels saving feral humanity with a cure. It presents two opposing visions of salvation and puts them in conflict, and in doing so adds so much more weight to the choices that the protagonist's character arcs represent. Does Ellie choose life over guilt, and in doing so side with free cooperation over dictatorship? Does Abby defy her father's memory in service of what's right, and in doing so abandon a cause that was never as noble as it seemed? All of this is far more compelling, with far more stake in the world Naughty Dog have built, than a self-sacrifice trope that sees Ellie almost unlearn the lesson that caused her to pull back from killing Abby. I made a video last year where I detailed how I'd set up the story of The Last of Us Part 3 and the conflicts which would drive the plot. That follows on nicely from what I've laid out here as my reasons for not wanting the self-sacrifice trope, so you should definitely check it out. It's linked in the description and at the end of this video. But I also want to know what you think. What would you want to see happen in The Last of Us Part 3? How would you have the story and character arcs I've laid out above play out? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like and consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content, like the video that's just popped up, which YouTube thinks you should watch next. Check out the links in the description to join my Patreon for as little as £1 per month, or donate to my GoFundMe, and get your name in the credits of my videos, like those rolling up now, who I want to thank for supporting me and my content. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.